Hey everybody, Christo, and this week we've got Tom van den Berg. Well, I tell you what, Tom has been the first, one of the first people I reached out to for the mining coach and for this podcast. And I think it's a couple of months now, Tom, 3 months. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah,
Eventually, I got you on the show.
good day, Christo. Yeah, apologies. Life is its way of keeping you busy. So
Exactly. And
thanks
you're a
for
busy man. So Tom is the senior vice president. He's like in charge of corporate or group strategy on the technical side and mining side. But Tom, thank you so much today. You have always been a leader that gives a lot back and you invest in people. And thank you for making this time this morning. I really appreciate you being on the show.
thank you, Christo. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh,
Exciting.
thanks. And Tom, so normally I do a bit of an introduction, but I don't want to do that. Just if you can just tell our listeners. So you are well known in the industry. You are, you've been around the block a few times in all over the world. But just our listeners and people watching on YouTube, just tell them a little bit about Tom, whatever you want to share with us this morning.
Yeah, sure, Christo. Thanks. I think if you had to dial back into, life, and if you ever have the benefit of doing A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, you'll sort of dial into it and you'll sort of go, so why am I here? Because that's always the question
Yes.
that you have to ask. And then when you look at, when you were born, the situation you were born in, the town that you were born in, your upbringing, your background, it sort of positions you, not by chance, but by there's a plan. And you need to understand that plan and turn around and say, okay, so what is God's plan for my life? And then you land up saying, okay, so how do I fit into this plan? What is my role? How do I be? So for me, it was a time in my life where I had to go and look back and say, what is it? And what is it that makes me as an individual tick? So I said, well, definitely people, adventure, and leadership. So if I find people that I can lead and there's an adventure, I'm happy to go. So that's me. I like doing that. So if there isn't adventure, I don't want to go. I don't do the boring. I like to be able to lead people. So there must be some leadership inside it. And then you look back in your life, you see that you've been, and I mean, leadership is something you can work on, but there's a certain amount of inherent leadership capability that you have as an individual. It's a talent that you have, but other people can build that talent. So it's not to
Yes.
say that you don't have that talent. So I was born in a mining town, grew up in a gold mine, top of a gold mine, literally and figuratively. Used to get woken up by seismic events. So my mother had like a printer's tray where she had all these fancy like little trinkets inside. And in the middle of the night, we get this boom, boom, and then the trinkets would fall down and the tray would fall down. There were new cracks in the walls, and you would wake up with the dogs barking and things happening. And that was how I grew up. So I grew up with this life on a gold mine, a deep level gold mine happening underneath me. And everybody around you was working on the mine. So it was a mining town. Three mines in the area supported that area. And I grew up, all of my friends at school were all, in mining. When I say they're all in mining, their parents were in mining.
Yeah.
Their fathers worked on the mines. There was very few homes that were private homes. Majority were all mine homes. And then my father ended up being killed, and he was electrocuted. So he ended up working on an HT cable, got badly electrocuted, and died 2 weeks later with blood clots going through his brain. I was 7 years old, and you become an orphan in terms of a mine orphan.
Yeah.
So you'll end up understanding death and that mining takes people's lives. And you'll end up in a situation where you're sort of going, okay, so my dad's gone, we five kids, how are we going to get through this? And my mom said, well, we have to just do the best that we can inside the situation.
Oh,
So, and I say this as a bit of a joke, and I've said it before, but my father said, of his dead body, would any of his sons work on the mines? And
oh,
he is dead, and three of us worked on the mines. So
oh no.
that's what ended up happening. We landed up being in the mine. So I wanted to go and do agriculture. I wanted to do a BSc, and I was fully written up, going to go and study a BSc in Pietermaritzburg, and I just couldn't get the funding. So there was no funding. So off I went to the mines, and that's where it started. So, you off disappeared to the mines. And I guess the irony was those days, is that you would arrive there, and I didn't ask me about my matric and what I achieved and what was my marks. It was, do you play rugby? And I was like, I play rugby. Who did you play for? And you tell them who you played for and where you were. And then they say, okay, you've got a job. And I say, well, did you want to see my matric certificate? And they're like, no, okay, yeah, that's important. So, and then they said to me, so the sort of you land up in this role where they say, so what do you want to be? So I said, well, I don't know. So I said, well, you're matric, you can do anything on the mine. You can choose. So they said to me, well, go and have a look. So they sent me off to metallurgy. They sent me off to all the different departments. And then they sent me off to mining. And as a child, I grew up living on this mining town. There was general managers' houses that were close to us. And my father used to take us walking at night. On a summer's evening, we'd go for a walk as a family because there wasn't TV in those days. So we'd go walking, and we'd walk around these GM's houses, and these guys had like big houses, lots of people that were looking after them, drivers and people standing at the gate and all this type of stuff. And you're sort of like, this looks like a great job to do one day. So I guess imprinted upon you is to sort of, okay, that looks like the right thing to do. So I mean, out of stupidity, you sort of say, so who's the guy that lives in that big house? And they say, no, he's the general manager. And I say, well, what did he do? What did he study? No, he studied mining. But after I'd gone through all of these departments, I said, no, I'll do the mining thing because that seems to be the right place to go. It wasn't the intelligent choice. And I say it wasn't like I decided this is what I'm going to study.
Yeah.
It was purely, and I thought at that stage, I actually thought that I was going to work for a year, save enough money, and put myself through my first year of varsity, do my BSc Agric.
Yes.
So, and I was keen to go back and do that. So
Yeah.
off I went. And the first year of my life was at working was just too much wine, woman, and song. And there was too much partying, and there was no money saved. And I had my own car, and it was independence. And after a year, I realized I hadn't actually saved up any money, and I wasn't going to go back to what I was going to do. And then the mine fortunately turned around in those days, and they said, well, we'll send you off to go and study.
Wow.
So, okay, so let's go and study mining. So off we went. Got our blasting ticket, and then decided to go and study. And that was how you call it, by default, landed up in mining.
Mm.
And after 4 years of studying, you then land up finishing up, and then you sort of going, okay, so is this what I really want to do? Do I want to do this actually? And I've got the qualification. And then you make a decision in your life, and you say, well, this is what I need to do. So at that stage, I was keen to leave the mining industry
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't actually want to stay in mining. I didn't
Mm.
like the environment was quite rough, and the people
Mm.
were rough, and the situations were rough, and the industry was,
Yeah.
gold was at $360 an ounce. So there was this continual retrenchment going on. So it was a very challenging industry at that stage to actually make a sort of a decision to commit to.
Mm.
But again, you decide that you're going to try another thing in life. I didn't leave, but I then got transferred. Well, so I did all my mining experience on deep level gold mining. As a youngster, cut my teeth in that, did my blasting certificate, ship bossing, all the likes thereof, and then landed up at the end of the day being married and needing a occupation for my then wife. And she needed to do something. So she was basically being qualified as a CA, and the mine didn't have sort of work for people that were that well qualified, and women couldn't work on a mine. So it was
Yeah.
the other side. So we had to decide to move up to Johannesburg to get work where she could work and I could work at the same time. And then I landed up on Ramfton Estates. So that was landing up in the old JCR mine. And I chose it because it was mechanized mining, and it was a new type of mining. So
Yeah.
I thought, okay, this is the future, and this is what I should be going into. But let
Yeah.
me take one step back.
Yeah.
Just back to the days that I spent on Buffelsfontein Gold Mine, because Buffelsfontein Gold Mine was one of the Gencor mines. It was quite a renowned mine in the Gencor field. It was a tough mine, lots of fires, lots of seismic events.
Mm.
I saw lots of people die. I was part of the proto team, recovered people, rescued people, horrific stuff that you sort of see and you go through inside that. But that was a part of the learnings. But I guess the biggest learning, if I could dial back into my Buffels days, was there was a team leader, and I don't remember his name right now, but I was sitting on the panel and I was actually learning how to mine. I was
Yeah.
like a learner miner, and you had in those days you had chalk or paint and you had to mark it. And I was trying to learn how to mark his face to get the people to drill the face. And this team leader, he said to me, "Who are you?" So I said to him, "I'm Boss Tom."
Oh no.
So he said to me, he said, "I asked your name, not your title. I know what
Oh,
your title
wow.
is." But it put me right in place, right in the start of my career,
Yeah.
because I realized then you earn respect, you don't demand respect.
Wow.
And that
Yeah.
was probably with him. I mean, if I take the individual, um, he taught me a lot of good things. He taught me mining, he taught me how to do mining, he taught me how to manage the people, the work that they do. And if I had to find the individual today, I would, give him a whole bunch of accolades and say thank you very much, because he actually helped me and he set a good base for me in my career.
Wow. Yeah.
And I guess my brother, who was also in mining at that stage, also um, he said to me, there were two things that stuck with me. There's this team leader that turned around and said to me, "You're not Boss Tom. Your name's Tom, and don't demand respect. People will give you respect if you deserve it."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, I get that." And the other one was my brother, who said to me, "Remember, people do the work, not machines. Get the people to do the work, the production will happen. Get the
Yeah.
people on your side, the production will happen. They're not machines, they're people. If you get them to do the work and you get them to work with you, your life is easy." So those were the learnings that I really got out of those sort of fundamental days. And we really had good sort of like education through the School of Mines, what we called in the Government Mines Training College, where they took us and they trained us. And we had to do the full Government Mines Training College with people and understand what it is that they were doing.
Yeah.
So you got a very good fundamental of what the basic jobs were on a mine and how that worked. So as an operator, doing work with a shovel, with a spade, with a hammer, with a pick, you had to do all of that work. And I say that's really good, because you can understand what your workforce is capable of.
Yeah.
You can't expect someone to build a pack or to dig a trench or do whatever they have to do if you can't do it yourself or have not done it yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe I'll pause there and just take a breather.
Yeah. But Tom, if you, yeah, that's sort of the first phase of your career, and you've said, I'm a guy of adventure, I'm a guy of leadership, and that sort of first leadership thing started happening with you. And just for our audience, the reason, one of the big things that you impacted on my career, and for those that don't know, so Tom was the general manager, I was production manager, and I was, for a short stint of my career, reported to Tom at one of the biggest, mines at that stage in the region. And I got this opportunity to become a general manager from another company. So I had to actually, for many years, I was in this one company and had this opportunity to go elsewhere. But Tom, you did something that was amazing. When I told you I've got this opportunity, you sat me down and you said to me, this is the stuff. Do you know what you're going to ask in the interview? And I sort of, so my mind is like spinning. What is this guy about? Why is he asking me this question? But you were paying it forward in a way that you actually guided me to say, move for the right reasons. And you gave me 3 reasons why, that are good reasons for why leaving one company to go to another. Instead of just, trying to keep me back, or, you had fundamental leadership capabilities there. And I've always looked up at that and after that, so many people that were reporting to me that left or was going somewhere else, I'd used the Tom model. And so that I've never stopped doing that. That's a model you taught me, and that was leadership. And also when we were on the Association of Mine Managers Council for South Africa and you were the president, I saw your leadership there. Where did this whole leadership, apart from this one guy at Buffels that started to tell you, look, you earn their respect, where did this leadership thing start for you?
As I said, I think there's a certain amount of inherent born leadership.
Okay.
That you're born with a certain amount of talent, but
Yeah.
I don't want to limit there and say that people can only have leadership capability if you're born with, because it's not true.
Yeah.
You can grow your leadership capability, and you can be born with a certain amount of ability, and then you don't grow that any further. So there's also that component, is that it's something that you're continually going to work on, and it's almost like exercise your body and exercising your brain. If you don't exercise your leadership, you actually become a little bit not bad. You're not as well you're not leadership fit. So
Yeah.
leadership fitness is also an important portion. You've got to remain leadership fit.
Yeah.
So for me, I was at primary school, I was a leader. So I was head boy at primary school, which then gave me leadership capabilities. At high school, I was also leadership roles. When I went to what we in those days, we had a thing called Felt School. Out of 3 schools, I was selected as the A1 leader of all the, I don't know why, like, wow, okay. I don't know where you saw this in the last week, but anyway, okay, that's fine. I did 2 years in the military, compulsory national service. I had to choose between jail and going to the army, so I chose going to the army because it was better than not seeing your girlfriend for 6 years. So off I went to the military. I was a leader in the military. So I led a military area. As a national serviceman, I was doing a permanent force guy's job, where they actually appointed me into that leadership role and looked after the camp. So
Yeah.
it was like, okay, so there I was fortunate to be in that situation again. And then you'll end up in your mining career, and I guess it's the love for people
Yeah.
and understanding people. I think you're probably the one place where you learn, and you sort of you have to have a heart for people to start with. So, and now you're making me think, as I'm actually sitting here and I'm thinking back now to so where did some of this come from?
Yeah.
I would have to ascribe some of it to my grandfather, who's my namesake. So when my father passed away, I was 7 years old, and my grandfather stepped in as a father role, and I would spend time with him.
Yeah.
We would go out to his farm. So his farm was just on the northern side of Cullinan Diamond Mine, and we would spend time with him. And he was a teacher. He was actually the headmaster of the primary school out in Cullinan Diamond Mine, and he had a lot of leadership capability in that village. I used to go with him, and we'd sort of see, and he'd spend time with him. I think he imparted a lot of stuff to us.
Okay.
Um, so I haven't thought about that before. You actually just sparked a thought, and I recall now. Okay, so granddad was actually grandfather, Opa Tom, as we knew him, was
Okay.
actually quite an inspirational guy, and he actually had quite a lot to do in our lives. So probably he's got something to do with it, somewhere inside that process. But then you build on it,
Yeah.
because you could do nothing, and you could do nothing thereafter.
Yeah.
I went to, when I went to Ramsden Estates, JCI had a tough culture. It wasn't an easy culture. If I compared to Genco was more family orientated and smaller shafts, and they were sort of like you felt part of a team, part of a
Mm.
family. JCI, I remember being out on this mine, and there were 100 shift supervisors in the changehouse, 17 mine captains. It was a massive mine, in terms of people
Yeah.
size, a lot of
Yeah.
people. But you again, I, you earn respect in what you do.
Mm.
So in my time that I was with them, um, what I always found was, and I take that learning back again from a book where Napoleon and I often use this example, but Napoleon and Wellington, and what made the difference between Napoleon and Wellington. And if you've heard the story before, forgive me, but I'll tell it quickly, is Wellington had three things that he did that made a difference in his leadership capabilities. So most people don't know where the name Wellingtons come from, gumboots. Wellingtons comes from General Wellington, because he went and spoke to the army troops in the trenches. And he said to them, so what are you battling with? And they said, we've got foot rot. Our stomachs aren't working, so we've got diarrhea. We're standing on our own feces here with foot rot, trying to fight the war. And what Wellington then did was he created the Wellington gumboot to fix their feet and to fix the foot rot. And what he then did was he went to the kitchen and he went and fixed the food, because the army runs on its stomach.
Yeah.
So in that capability, he then had fixed two of their physical problems. But then what he did was he climbed on a horse. And where the lines were breaking, where the morale was weak, he, the general, would go and sit behind them and rally the troops with the lines. So he'd go to the weak places in the business and rally the troops. Wellington was very different to Napoleon, because Napoleon was sitting at the back with a wig on, drinking his tea. And when things got too tough, he just, sip his tea and said, sorry, and climb on his horse and off you go. He wouldn't go into the battlefield.
Yeah.
But when you listen to that story, and I'm using that as an equivalent to what I learned in my process, was, so mining the UG2 at a Mandelbrot.
Yeah.
The guys say, oh, we're battling to do this work.
Yeah.
So okay, let me go underground. Let me go and understand what you're battling with. You take a shovel and you actually go and stand in the crosscut with the shovel, and you load the hoppers. You load the mud with the guys in the crosscut. Firstly, they look at you and they say, at that stage, I was mine captain, section manager, and they say, Numzan, you're not supposed to be here. That's like saying, boss, you're not supposed to be here. This is our job. Okay?
Yeah.
But I want to understand why you guys are battling, because I want to see what the problem is. And very simplistically, what I did then was I looked at the shovels and I said, but you're using a standard size shovel, but the UG2 mud is 25% heavier than standard mud. So the UG2 has got a lot of chrome in it, and therefore it makes it exceptionally heavy. And when you stick the shovel into the mud, you can't actually lift it, because it gets glued in, and then it's too heavy and you can't get it up and you can't throw it over the hopper.
Yeah.
So we made smaller shovels.
Yeah.
And we actually designed smaller shovels for the people.
Yeah.
Because we realized that they could not lift these heavy shovels, and they actually weren't bad people. They just couldn't actually do the job. So that's an example of where, and there's multiple of those types of examples where you sort of go, let me go understand how and why people are battling.
Yes.
And seek first to understand and then be understood.
Yes.
So that's that whole, Covey's model.
Yeah.
And that's an implication of that. I mean, we went to, I'm just going to use the UG2 as an example again. We went and had a look at the scrapers that we're using. And the scrapers were too big. The windstrokes were too small. And then you start understanding what the guys are battling with, and you fix it.
Yeah.
And they actually come to you and they say, thank you. Thank you for helping us. Yes. Now, what people are normally used to in the industry, and that's the difficult industry that I sort of grew up in, is that you'd rather be hard on the people than understand what they're actually battling. Yeah. So for me, it was about going in and understanding what they're battling with, rather than being hard on them. So, I mean, I remember as a shift supervisor, oh my goodness, we used to have a mine overseer. So let me not go to names, but so this guy used to arrive at work, and when he arrived at work, we all used to run out of the office because no one wanted to be in the office. But how do you lead people if you can't speak to them, if you can't influence them?
Yes.
So it doesn't help that there's this absolute fear for the leader, because then the leader has got no ability to influence. So if you arrive in a place, wherever you are, or you're supposed to be talking to people and the people run away, well, you don't influence anybody. So you've got to be able to talk to people to be able to influence them. So that was the key issue, is to get that, being able to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, on Randfontein, as an example, we would go, and I mean, the shaft was battling to make a certain amount of their call. Go and spend time underground on afternoon shift, understanding what it is. And it was clear there was a problem with the locomotives where they were tramming through the wrong haulages. And we changed it, and the tonnage changed. We just upped the tonnage big time. Everyone was like, oh, just had to go and spend some time,
Exactly.
understand what the problem was. And I think that's where, if you look at, got to be careful about the political references, but if you look at leaders that make an influence and that have a good following and have backing from people, it's that leader's got your back. And you know that he actually cares. And you know that he's actually concerned about how to make the job happen. So, in long story short, I would say it's about playing the ball and not the man. And that's the key portion. Often you find leaders that play the man, they don't play the ball. Climbing into people's characters doesn't help the game. It's about playing the ball and not the man. So let me pause there again and take another question.
No, but those are wonderful examples about, the people side of it. And when you and I prepped before the time, you spoke about, and I asked you, what do you want to talk about? And you said, yeah, somewhere around the area of just the people, sowing into people's lives, investing in people. And so your love for people is very real, and your care for people is very real, because I've experienced it firsthand. I remember there's one meeting we had this weekly meeting, and you were leading the meeting. It was like a safety meeting, weekly meeting, and you were so upset about I think it was a serious accident with bell wire or signaling device. You would run up and down this meeting and say, please make this distinguishable that everybody can see the bell wire. That, hey, I'm the bell wire, pull me. I don't know if you ever recall that, but I
I do.
it was amazing that you cared so deeply for people that you would make yourself look foolish in front of people, and I think that was also just a huge group of people. I think there was like 60 shift bosses at that shaft, and you would run up and down and make yourself look really foolish, but everybody remembered what the principle is that you were trying to convey to them. And your
Yeah.
love for people in just giving back and investing in them. We talk about play the ball and not the man, but there's so many women, and you've been impacting people throughout this industry. Why do you want to talk about this subject about investing in people? And what would you tell a younger Tom or younger Christo about to invest in your people and make a difference in their lives?
Yo. So Christo, I had moving to Johannesburg, I had the fortunate pleasure, and I say fortunate, unfortunate pleasure. So I got divorced at that stage. It was quite a tough time in my life. I had to go and find myself inside this process, uh, find out who I was. I'd lost myself a bit inside the process, and and met my Savior again. Recommit my life to the Lord, and turn around and say, okay. So as I said earlier, I was like saying like I'd like to leave the mining industry, and and I remember the Lord said to me, and He took me back, and He said to me, He said, "Remember that day when you prayed to get your manager's ticket?" And I said, "No, but show me." So He took me back, and there I was um, praying and asking the Lord, "Help me get my mine manager's certificate." He said, "Okay," and I did help you, and you passed. You were one of the few people that passed that year, and you passed well. I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "So I gave you that mine manager's ticket for nothing." And he said, I said, "No, no, Lord, you didn't give it me for nothing." He said, "So who's going to show the light in the dark places?" And I was like, "Okay, I understand." So going back now to, if you dial back into the uh, purpose-driven life, Rick Warren,
Yeah.
where were you born? Why were you brought up there? Why did you grow up in that society?
Yes.
What's your background? Why have I placed you at this time in this place? And then you find your purpose.
Yeah.
So I understood, okay, so my purpose is I must go and shine the light where the light hasn't been shone before.
Yeah.
Or not that hasn't been shone before, but who will be that example for
Mm.
people, who will be
Mm.
that ability for people. So probably the first thing that you learn is, how do you love yourself as an individual?
Yeah.
Because you can't help people unless you don't like yourself. Man, we've all got things that are wrong with us. I mean, and you'll have haters. There's going to be haters out there. Whether you like it or not, they hate you. Doesn't matter what you do. You must just accept there's going to be people that hate you. But the bottom line is that if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love others? So you first got to be, as an individual, be comfortable with who you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, something that sitting in church yesterday, and they were talking about the fear of man, and it was something that I was able to deal with at a very young age. In that same period, was not to have the fear of man. So the fear of man is you you're more worried about man than you're worried about your purpose in life.
Yeah.
And there's a bigger purpose at the end of the day. So it's about fulfilling your bigger purpose and not fulfilling the fear of man and being driven into do things because of the fear of man. And that would be, what's the fear of man? It could be, the likes of being influenced by people to do the wrong things. And the fear of man is that you'll do that. Whereas if you don't have the fear of man, you stand by what you stand and you say, this is the way it's going to be. So I'm getting a little bit of the points here. They might have to remind me of the question, but let me just remember this.
Yeah,
Let me
sure.
just get this little piece before. So I arrived at a Mandelbrot, and there was huge fear management at a Mandelbrot. It was driven by fear.
Yeah.
No names, no pectoral. You can work
Yeah.
at the time who was
Yeah.
there and what they were doing and why they were doing it.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in front of my shift supervisors and I said to them, I don't manage by fear. And these guys were like,
Who's this?
who, why? And I said, I want you to know something. I do not manage by fear. I said, I do believe that if you've done something wrong, you must pay the price. Okay, so if you've done something wrong, be a man, stand up, take your punishment, move on. So if you're not going to work according to rules, you're going to have to deal with it. But I'm not going to manage by fear. What I didn't want my people to do was, I remember driving up to the T junction, and you look left and it says Tabazimbi, and you look right and it says Rustenburg. And you say, do I go and look for a job in Rustenburg today, or do I go to work, which was the Tabazimbi side? And I didn't want my people to come to work like that. I didn't want my people to think when they get to the T junction, do I go left or do I go right?
Yeah.
I wanted them to, when they're deciding to take another job, they actually must think twice about, do I actually want to leave my current employer? And it's not your employer, it's the person that you work for. It's the boss that you're working for. Do I want to leave my current boss, knowing that where I'm going to go, I might not get as great a boss? So it's about that understanding that you want to instill in people. But remind me about the question again, because I think I've diverted the subject.
No, you didn't. You definitely, because we're talking about people and developing them, and you've just explained it. The question is, where did this passion for people come from? And you went back to your purpose. And a lot of our listeners haven't figured that out yet. And I remember myself, and you were talking your own story about how do you find your purpose in this game, because in this mining game, because a lot of us land up, and your story is the same as mine, is that you land up there because it was sort of the only thing at the time. And all the other like doors were closed, and this is the job you could get, and you end up just being there. But you've also discovered your purpose is, I'm going to make a difference. You're a person of faith, and you're outspoken about that, and I respect that. And a lot of people on this podcast do not maybe subscribe to what you and I subscribe to, but that doesn't matter. You found your purpose, and your purpose was, I need to shine my light, and I need to be there for the people. And and Tom, in terms of the joy, how do we, and when I say we, our listeners, they sit with people on their teams, and they lead people on their teams. What would your advice be to them that struggle with investing in them? I just need them to do their jobs. They must just tick the boxes. I want them to finish what they need to do for the day. How do we get people to move and what would you say to a younger Tom that hasn't figured that out yet?
So first and foremost, I mean, I studied accounting, and when I did accounting, I did it as a part-time. So when I was studying mining, I was doing my BCom part-time. So I did a BCom through UNISA part-time. And the one thing that you see on a balance sheet is you see there's assets and there's liabilities. And people can be either or.
Mm.
And often your job as the manager and the leader puts them either as an asset or a liability.
Mm.
You can make the people a liability or you can make them an asset. That capability sits within your own hands as the leader. So, you know, you don't have to look far right now to understand there's wars happening in the world, and some leaders are making their people into liabilities, and some of them are making them into assets. When I say assets, is they're on your side, they've got your back, they've got your purpose, they're with you, and they're part of the team. And then there's the other side, which, people are liabilities. When people are liabilities, you see them as machines, you see them as things that you use to achieve a purpose and to achieve an end, and you don't really consider who the person is. So that little lesson that team leader taught me, I took further in my career. And one of the key things is it's something that if people know your name, it just makes a massive difference. So when you go and meet somebody,
Yes.
you don't say, come here, machine operator, or come here, winch driver, or come here. You call them, you say, how are you? What's your name? How many
Yes.
children? Where did you grow up?
Yeah.
And you make a personal contact with
Yes.
that individual,
Yes.
because that person wants to know that you see them as an individual,
Yes.
first and foremost. So when you call people by their name, that's the name their parents gave them. That's the name they like being called. So you've immediately achieved something by engaging with a person, and you use their name. And when you really blow their mind is when you come back there and you remember their name without asking them, and you say to
Exactly.
them, how are you? You
Yeah.
talk to them by their name,
Yeah.
and then you ask them about how their children are. Because now, I mean, I'm not talking to you as if you're an object or a machine.
Yes.
I'm understanding that you are an individual that's in this business with people, with children, and you're basically there because you're supporting your kids. And that's the reason why most people end up in mining, is just to support their families. Um, so if you understand what's important to people and you engage them on that, you've already got them 2/3 of the way.
Absolutely.
But what made it more, and I'll dial back into my time as a manager up on Anandabal, because I probably had more time on
Tom,
my hands.
Tom, can you park that? I'm going to be very rude. Can you park that idea? I just want to tell our listeners, you've explained the story about remembering people's names, and once again, that's another example where you impacted me profoundly. Because I could never figure out, how do you remember all these people's names? You remember one time I asked you, Tom, how do you do this? And you sort of took me through the process but this guy, and I want our listeners just to know that this is not just Tom talking about theory. This is a man that I've personally seen him practicing it on a day-by-day basis, where he would meet people all the time and he would remember their names, and he would come back. And at that stage, Tom, what also was amazing to me, you didn't ask them, and a person would say, whatever, he would use the English name and you would use his African name. And then you would make it a point to say, no, I want to know what your African name, not just your English name. And then you would recall the African name, whether it's Tabile or whoever that is, just by example. And that impacted me in a big way. So I just want to tell our listeners, this man is not just talking about it. He actually does this on a regular basis. And I've seen it in practice. Sorry, Tom, please go back to your story.
I must remember where I was now, but let me just dial that back into, because you reminded me about something right now. You're talking about the story with the guy with the bell wire, and it was actually the story there. It reminds me of, can you remember the people that died in your care?
Yes.
Because if you can remember who they are, it makes it a very different story.
Yes.
So the last person that whose life I lost in my care was Bright Familie at Rustenburg. And when you stand up and you talk to people about it was Bright Familie that died, it's a very different story than I had a team leader that lost his life.
Yeah.
And I knew Bright Familie had 9 daughters, 1 son. And just that whole contextualizing it, putting it into that contextualized, where it's people that are losing their lives, not numbers that are losing their life, changes that fundamentally. But then when they're alive, it makes it even more important, because you actually then turn around and you actually engage with a person, and you don't engage. And African people have got a wonderful story about their names. Normally, when they're born, their parents have given them a name specifically as to their background, where they're born, who they are. So, when someone says Ntombi Futi, you go, oh, okay, you were the second daughter, or what daughter were you? Because the name's already saying, I'm a daughter, and it's a girl again. Yes. So there's a reason why their parents have called them that. So it's about understanding that, because that's who they are. That's who they've grown up. That's their background. So if you dial into that, you dial into engaging people. And I mean, if you look at the world, there's how many stories out there about downtrodden teams that have been taken by a leader and turned into, with the same people, they turned into brilliant teams.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't change the people. They took the same people and they engaged those people, and they got. So coming back to that portion about the assets and liabilities, people have unlimited potential. So, machine, if you put an LHD out there, a drill rig out there, a drill, whatever it is, you put it out there, it's got limited potential. It can drill so fast, it can drill so many holes, it can do whatever it needs to do, but there's a limit. People, unlimited. Question that you've got to do is you've got to turn around and say, how do I tap into that unlimited potential? So what I was trying to say was, as a production manager, I used to have lunch once a week with one of my shift bosses, and I used to sit them down. So I used to try to go down to the shift supervisor level, which normally the production manager didn't engage with the shift supervisor. It was like, but I want to do, and I'd have lunch with them. I'd go to the single quarters and I'd book a table, and we'd have a steak and chips. And then I'd say, this is, because I didn't want to do like CDPs, which are formal. I wanted to do informal CDP. And then I invite HR to come and sit with at the table. And I'd say to HR, you're not going to sit here and make notes in a book. You're going to listen. Then afterwards, you're going to go and write down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I want this to be an eye conversation. And then I'd say to guys, okay, so what's your plan for your life?
Yeah.
Why are you doing what you're doing? Where are you with your mine captain's ticket? What is it where you'd like to finish in your career?
Yeah.
So a lot of leaders would be challenged by people doing better than they have. So if you looked at a true person, you would always employ people better than you, because it makes your team better. And you would want them to do better than what you've done, because that's truly releasing people into the potential. So that whole story about, I'm just going to find the light in the darkness and shine that light, is the true gold that you mine, the true precious metal that you mine. It's not the metal. I don't remember, well, I can tell you about the times that I made call and all that type of stuff. And there were many times that I produced my call. But the more important times was when I got that phone call from a ship boss, or SMS or a WhatsApp, and they would say to me, I just want to let you know I got my mine captain's ticket. I said to you 5 years ago, I'm going to get it, and I've got it. And then they let you know I've been appointed as a manager, or this. And that to me that's the true gold that you're mining. Because if you believe it or don't believe it, there's going to be a day where we all depart, and we're going to land up, and we're going to be looked at our lives, and our lives are going to be put in front of us and said, so what did you actually deliver in your life? That gold, that platinum, that BMW, that car, all those possessions are going to mean nothing. Those titles that you achieved, that's going to mean nothing. But you were given a certain amount of people that you could influence, and you could influence their lives. And did you influence it for the positive, or did you influence it for the negative?
Yes.
So So if we're doing good and we bringing the good out in people, and that's your job, is to bring the good out in people. Look for the good, because there's good in every single individual. You just
Yes.
got to find it, you got to tap into it, and then you engage that good, and then you do it for the greater good. And it's about taking the gold that's out there. And I'm talking about the gold being the people that are out
Yeah.
there, making them into better people.
Yeah.
Because that is, that's the, when that gets tested one day, it'll pass through the fire. But that BMW is not going to pass through the fire. It's going to get burnt inside the fire. So that
Yeah.
talent that title that you had, it's not going to get through the fire.
Yeah.
But it's about people's lives that you changed, people's lives that you influenced. And if you look at your, if I look at mining villages and the destruction that some of it's brought into people's families, is you sort of go, there's so much destruction that's come with some of the stuff that's happened. Is
Mm.
how do we place good back inside this process?
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's what motivates one, is that at the end of the day, you can put your head down in the cushion, and when you go to sleep, you can go to sleep with a clear conscience. And as I say, there's going to be haters out there. There's going to be people. You can't keep all the people happy all the time. Some people will just think that you didn't do stuff that was for good. But I know in my heart of hearts that what I did was, I believe, was the right thing to do.
Mm. Well, Tom, thanks a lot. I think what's the time? Yeah. We're running
Sure.
into the 40 minute zone for our listeners, and we promise them we'll keep it somewhere in that range. Tom, any final words for you for a younger Tom? What would Tom do differently, or what would you stop doing, or what did you start doing? Anything, last words?
Yeah, I think, and it's a note, I mean, my own career right now, where you sort of say, what is it, that you're looking at going forward? So I'm just looking at my notes here, and I'm saying, um, what you continually want to do is you want to have a vision going forward. What are the performance outcomes that you want to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have a plan to get to those performance outcomes. So that one thing that you in your career is there's no definite that you're going to go this way and that way, and it's going to happen that way. So you've got to have like sort of a view as to the three ways that you're going to be achieving this. What is it I need to do to prepare myself for those next steps? So I think the most rewarding portions of your career is when you do organizational transformation. So I was very fortunate in Anglo Platinum to actually land up in a space where I was doing organizational transformation, but with people.
Mm.
As a mining engineer, I landed up with 6 industrial psychologists working for me. I mean, what are mining engineers doing with 6 industrial psychologists? But it's because you were actually, dealing with organizational transformation. So understanding about where you want to make the difference, understand the organizational transformation that you'd like to bring. When you look back on your career, what's the legacy that you've left? Can you walk away from the industry and say, a lot of people will steal credit for things that you've done, but that you're the one that made that difference. You actually brought that change.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a simple thing about this. Everyone's fighting for the credit, but no one wants to do the work. You've got to be happy to do the work and not get the credit for it. But know that one day that credit is actually going to be yours. And credit on earth is short-lived, but credit in eternity is for eternity. So if you get your credit here, be happy with it because you got it. But if you get your credit in eternity, it's a very different situation, because you're actually going to be credited for stuff that you've done. And then I think innovation to improve people's lives. So, if you can implement innovation that actually makes people's lives easier, and it's not difficult stuff. It's like changing
Yeah.
the shovel size, changing that wing size.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I know I party to was taking people out of box holes,
Yeah.
having manned box holes.
Yeah.
People don't climb out of box hole. It's a
Yeah.
better place to work in. It's a nicer place to work. Instead of being hard on the people, try and turn around and say, how can I make your job better? How can you make your job easier? And that's a legacy that you can leave, where people look back and say, yeah, you walked away here. And there's a lot of stuff that you've done that you actually don't even know that you've impacted, like you've impacted. And there's too many examples. I mean, I could continue talking for too long. But I think that last portion is, I would say, is that if you look back in your career, it's the talent development that actually is the gold that you actually had.
Yes.
So when you can turn back and you can say, I know I touched this person's career, I know I touched that person's career, I know I developed here, and those people have ended up in better places and good places, and some of them have surpassed you.
Yes.
Then you turn around and say, well, I've done well. And here's the difficult one, is being a good subordinate to your boss.
Yes. Amen.
Because at the end of the day, you've got to turn around and say, part of being a leader is showing what it is to be a follower.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't work for great bosses, and you still have to try and be a good subordinate to show. And you've got to be that filter in between.
Yes.
So it's easy to come back and sort of just pass the buck and pass all the rubbish that was given to you by your boss, or you've got to filter that, and you've got to turn around and you've got to be a buffer to your team. Because if you just the whole time just, the boss has said this and you throw that at them 10 times, you don't help them inside the process. There's going to be stuff that the boss is going to say which your people don't need to hear. You just be the buffer and you say, my people don't need to hear that. Is it going to build, or is it going to break? And you've got to make a decision about, this will build my team, this will take my team forward, this will break my team, and you've got to be that buffer. And then sometimes you just got to let them feel a bit of the heat, but that you've got to understand, where's the right place to be as a leader. And that's situational leadership. So understanding the situation and being that leader inside that situation. Christo, I've got so much more I could share, but let's pause there.
Oh, the deepness and the wealth of the experience and the knowledge there. I think everybody listening to this podcast, knows that we can probably go on for another 2 hours and we won't stop. But Tom, I just want to thank you for making the time. It's been tough to get an hour in your diary to do this, but it's been an incredible conversation today. And thank you to our listeners for listening today. And thank you, Tom, for sharing. Thank you to those that are watching on YouTube. And Tom, probably people, if they want to get hold and in touch with you, they can reach out on LinkedIn, or I don't know if you've got an Instagram following or whatever, but is there any other way that you want them to get hold of you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the right place. Yeah, that's okay. Where one can do it.
Thanks a lot, Tom. And to our listeners, have an awesome day. Thank you so much. This was such an immersive conversation. Wasn't that the same for you? There was so much that we discussed today, but I'm just going to recap 5 points that Tom spoke about today. Part of being a leader is also about showing I'm a great follower. Secondly, are you a buffer for your team? Number 3, can you remember the people that were hurt under your care? Number 4, to be a leader, you have to have a heart for people. And finally, spend time with your people to understand their problems. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your mining. Cheers.